It may look like a flying egg beater, but behind this machine's quaint looks is a true Swiss Army knife in disguise, and one of the most legendary helicopters in Eastern Europe. The Kamov KA-26 is a small and rather strange-looking machine hailing from Russia. While mainly used as a crop duster, its wide range of capabilities truly belie its awkward appearance. This jack-of-all-trades could do it all. Air ambulance, cargo transport, passenger transport, forest firefighting, mineral prospecting, pipeline construction, laying transmission lines, search and rescue, and more. So what was the designer thinking exactly when they came up with this wacky design? Well, there was a method to the madness, and in order to understand the method, a bit of history is in order to follow the genius behind this unique machine. The Kamov story actually begins in Siberia, the birthplace of engineer Nikolai Kamov. Kamov was a locomotive engineer by trade, but had a passion for aviation. After acquiring a degree in aeronautical engineering, he developed a series of gyrocopters in the 1930s, which actually saw some use in World War II. In 1943, Kamov took a shot at developing his very first helicopter, but his approach was unlike anything else. The first helicopters developed by Igor Sikorsky employed a large rotor blade and a small tail rotor as a countermeasure for torque. Kamov felt this was inefficient, as the tail rotor robbed precious power from the engine. Plus, the rotor was huge and took up space. So in 1943, he developed his very first helicopter, the KA-8, which was nicknamed the Flying Motorcycle. The tiny helicopter used twin opposing rotors which turned in opposite directions. This resulted in a compact design which was easy for maneuverability into tight spaces and easy for storage too. This design provided the blueprint for all Kamov designs to come. Kamov then went on to design the first helicopters for the Navy and created a successful line ranging from the Kamov KA-20 to the Kamov KA-32. All of these were strong, stable designs that fared well in any type of weather and became the backbone for the Soviet Navy. And most important of all, they were perfectly suited for ships with their compact design, exactly as Kamov had intended. That's when Kamov identified a niche in the civilian market. Up to that point, crop dusting duties in Eastern Bloc countries were carried out primarily by Antonov An-2 biplanes. While these behemoths did an adequate job, there were scenarios where it would be practical to use a lighter aircraft. Up till then, another small helicopter named the MIL My-1 was used for such work, but operators felt it wasn't the right tool for the job. And thus, the KA-26 was born. The Kamov KA-26 was essentially a scaled-down version of previous military models, but rather than rely on power from expensive turbines, the KA-26 was powered with twin radial engines mounted on pods, making them much cheaper to own and operate. The KA-26 first flew in 1965, and right off the bat, the tiny helicopter revealed its huge potential. Its light and flexible rotor blades were made of fiberglass and could be easily removed, allowing the compact helicopter to be transported on a flatbed truck. Each blade was built to last up to 5,000 hours. Unique from other Kamov designs is a twin boom tail, which is a bit similar to a design I covered in another video, the Transavia air truck from Australia. This layout was likely selected to facilitate loading from any direction. Whether carrying passengers or chemicals, it had a payload of 900 kilograms, and all this mass was carried right at the center of gravity, below the rotor blades. The KA-26 was powered by twin Vedeneev M14s with 325 horsepower. The M14 is not only a reliable design, it's considered the backbone of general aviation in Eastern Bloc countries. You'll find M14s in many Yak designs, Sukhoi aerobatic planes, and even experimentals. The Kamov required practically full power at all times when in flight. So, in order to keep the radials cool and avoid blowing up, small turbines were installed in the front of the engine. These turbines yield a characteristic whine that makes it sound like a mix between a jet engine and a piston. Plus, they could run on regular automotive gasoline, a huge advantage in remote areas where aviation fuel might be hard to come by. Watching a KA-26 come to life is a sight to behold. As typical with radial engines, on startup it will burn off excess oil, leaving behind a huge white cloud of smoke in its wake. The KA-26 was designed for dirt simple maintenance using readily available tools. Take the engine pods for example. Unlike most helicopters where the engine is buried in the fuselage, the M14 radials are sticking out in the wind, making it easily accessible for mechanics or inspectors. The KA-26 can also be refueled with both engines running, as long as the fueler stays far away from the spinning rotors. The cockpit could carry a crew of 2, typically a pilot flying solo or a pilot and mechanic. The bubble-shaped cabin allowed for excellent visibility and was slightly pressurized. Why would you pressurize such a small helicopter? Could it fly to 20,000 feet? Pressurization helped keep all the dirty and toxic chemicals on the outside without leaking on the inside. Oddly, each little Kamov would leave the factory with an overabundance of cockpit instruments, allowing the little chopper to fly in instrument conditions even at night. This was presumably because Kamov designed the helicopter to serve both military and civilian operators. As it was, however, most operators chose to strip down their instrument panel, as it wouldn't be needed for crop dusting. The coaxial blades were a stroke of genius common to all Kamov designs, and the KA-26 greatly benefited from this design. Without a tail rotor boom, it was really compact and could easily land on flatbed trucks or even small ships. Pilots report that the KA-26 is highly maneuverable and will turn on a dime, greatly increasing efficiency during crop dusting. And for making a better show for spectators too. They say never judge a book by its cover. You could say the same for the KA-26. As ungainly as it looked, it set several world records, including a time to climb to 3,000 meters in only 8 minutes. In its role as a crop duster, it's been said the counter-rotating effect from the blades did a fantastic job at distributing its load over a wide area, with even distribution. While the K-26 shined in its duties on the fields, behind its ugly face hid a Swiss Army knife of a helicopter. You see, the space behind the cockpit could be used for many different missions. With the flick of a switch, the KA-26 could adapt to many different jobs. Simply attach a passenger pod between the landing gear, and voila, you had a cozy little airliner. And many times, its passengers didn't even land with a helicopter. The same passenger pod could also carry 2 stretchers and a nurse. Think of the bragging right of getting treated on one of these machines. Replace the passenger pod with a cargo platform, and you now have a virtual flying pickup in your hands. Tailgate party, anyone? A strange version for land surveying had a pulse generator in the cabin and surrounded by a huge hoop. Dangling below was a receiver that was towed in the air. It was essentially a huge flying metal detector. The KA-26 could attach a sling between its 4 wheels, where it could carry light loads dangling on a rope. This was very similar in concept to the Sikorsky S-64, which also used a unique flying crane design to carry huge external loads. And it didn't end there. Operators from different nations found many other uses for them. They could also be used for search and rescue operations when equipped with a winch. And in the 1970s, a Soviet fishing boat carried one along for fish spotting. KA-26s were also used to break ice from rivers in the winter. There were no limits to what this little chopper could do. Curious fact, the Kamov KA-26 even starred in the Netflix series Stranger Things. See, this chopper was Hollywood material. And in a tale that also could have been written in Hollywood, police in Moldova busted an operation producing illegal helicopters with no permits or licenses. These helicopters strongly resembled KA-26s, and by the time the police raided the operation, they were already partially complete. While the KA-26 turned out to be a great design for its mission, those little radial engines were a bit finicky to work with. So Kamov then designed the KA-126 and KA-226, which are modernized versions with Western-built turbines. These new models offered more power and efficiency, though they lost some of the KA-26's character. The turbine-powered versions didn't quite take off like the KA-26. So, was the KA-26 a success? While it never achieved the success of a Bell or Sikorsky helicopter, a respectable total of 850 were built between 1969 and 1978. These were delivered to 15 different countries, amassing a total flight time of nearly 3 million hours. You can still find these small, loud helicopters carrying on their business in Eastern European countries such as Hungary and Romania, where they continue to serve faithfully with no retirement in sight. So would you consider the KA-26 a beautiful machine? Maybe, maybe not. But the KA-26 is like the flying equivalent of the little engine that could, a true jack of all trades and a relentless warrior in its element. And that, in my book, makes it beautiful. I hope you like the Kamov KA-26 as much as I do. And if you want to see more unusual aircraft, be sure to subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more hidden gems waiting to be discovered. See you next time.